Welcome to another episode of The Financially Free Investor, where you will learn information and strategies on how to become financially independent by investing in real estate, something that is not taught openly in our society today. Financial freedom matters so you can live a bigger life, retire early, and do what matters most to you. Get ready to hear tried and true methods to becoming financially free with your host, Jordy Clark.
All right, everyone, welcome into another episode of The Financially Free Investor. I've got a buddy of mine, Craig Curelop. So we met at the mastermind GoBundance we're in, had some good conversations, had some raw, authentic conversations, just helping each other out in this story we call life, and kind of stayed in touch ever since. And Craig has an amazing platform and an amazing message that I wanted to share with all of you guys. So with that said, welcome in, Craig.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I know we've been in contact now, and it's awesome to finally get on and start chatting with your audience.
Yeah, for sure. So give everyone a 2-minute synopsis of who you are, what you're doing, and then we can kind of jump into the questions.
My name is Craig Curelop. I became financially independent at age 26. I started a real estate team at age 27, and basically I've just grown that real estate team. I'm 29 now. And so now our whole premise is that we help investors, first, second, third time investors buy their properties, by coach, guide, and mentoring them through that entire process. Cause buying a property it's not easy, especially if it's your first or second time. I've got a team of real estate agents. I've got a handful of rental properties, and just trying to, live life to the fullest, just like yourself, man.
Yeah, cool, man. So how did you get started on your journey to financial freedom?
Yeah, man. So it all started my first job out of college, right? And so I went to school, Northeastern University, that basically praised entrepreneurship was like a small little thing that they did, but like in the finance sector that I was in, it was like you get a job at the big companies, right? And so I got a job at one of the top, what they call venture debt firms in Silicon Valley, which was a dream job for anyone in my major. Got there and it was great for about 6 months, but then I realized that what the hell was I doing? Right? Like, sure, I was making like over 100 grand at 22 years old, which isn't bad, but I was also working 100-hour weeks, not having any time for friends or family or exercise or anything that actually makes life worth living. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, how do I get out of this? I do not want to do this forever. I look down the hallway and I look at my career and I'm like, wow, my career is just 30 feet down the hallway. Right? If I want to stay here for 10 years and grow the corporate ladder, and there's just no way in hell I wanted to do that. And so my friend gave me this book called The 4-Hour Workweek. And in that book, Tim Ferriss, I'm sure you've all read it. If you haven't, you got to read it. He talks about passive income on a monthly basis needs to be greater than your expenses on a monthly basis. And then you're financially free. And then you kind of unlock life in a way. And so I was like, damn, I got to do that. So I started thinking of dumb idea after dumb idea after dumb idea. I was in Silicon Valley, right? So everyone had a startup. Nothing was hitting, obviously. And then I just stumbled upon real estate. And I was like, wow, this seems like really easy. I heard a stat that 90% of the world's millionaires own real estate. So why do I have to do something that, is unproven when I can just go the proven route? And I don't care about the fame. I just want the freedom. So then I found Bigger Pockets and all that. And then that's kind of where the journey started, my man.
Wow. So it was the 4-Hour Workweek. I'll be honest, I was totally expecting Rich Dad, Poor Dad to be the book.
Everyone says Rich Dad, Poor Dad, man. I remember like listening to podcasts, people recommending Rich Dad, Poor Dad and being like, I still haven't read that damn book. I got to read that book. And finally I read it and I was like, oh my God, it's everything I ever wanted. It's everything that's in my head, like condensed down in this little book. Like, yes. So it felt good to read it, but it wasn't the groundbreaking one for me.
That's awesome. Hey, 4-Hour Workweek is definitely, that's like, it's the red pill in the Matrix, right? Where you take it and all of a sudden you realize like, man, our society is told exactly what you said, like you were told, right? Like you got to get good grades to get accepted to a good college, and you got to, get good grades there to get accepted to a good job. And then all of a sudden you fast forward, you've got the good job, but you're working 100 hours a week, which, man, what a grind. And there's no escape, right? You're like, man, this is 10 years. Like I can already see where I'm going to be. So then found Bigger Pockets. That's really cool, man.
The Bigger Pockets is like, that's like the the slide down the rabbit hole, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can, at least for me, like once I started listening to the podcast, and this was back when it was Josh and Brandon on the podcast, and I was just like, dude, I'm hooked, right? And I was so skeptical, like anything that wasn't the way I thought it was a scam in my head. And somehow these guys got through to me and realized that like real estate investing wasn't a scam. And yeah, man, it's been, then, I guess from there, I basically went on this trip to South America for a month and found myself, as you will, and basically just decided that like I needed to get the hell out of California. I needed to quit my job and I needed to get into real estate. And so that weekend I got back from South America, I applied to 250 jobs in one weekend.
Whoa.
Literally from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. both days, Saturday, Sunday, I was just applying to jobs. And 249 of those jobs were like $8 to $10 an hour real estate agent assistant jobs in Florida. And one was at a little company called Bigger Pockets in Denver. And so if you know anything about my story, you know where I ended up. I was fortunate enough to get that position in Denver. And so I moved to Denver, and that was kind of like, the beginning of the end for the real estate stuff.
Yeah. So walk us through that as you were, working through this and you figured out, hey man, there's totally a different way than working, at the same place 100 hours a week for the next 20, 30 years. What was that like working at Bigger Pockets as they were flourishing and the podcast was growing? And you eventually published a book there, right?
Yep. Yeah. So honestly, at first it was like a dream come true, right? I was like sitting in a room with Josh Dorkin, and I can literally just instant message Brandon and he'll get back to me. And Scott is my boss. Like, what is this? Right. Like it was amazing. But then after a couple of weeks, it kind of sets in. You're like, oh, these guys are now just my colleagues and they're my peers. And now they're my friend, and they slowly become my friends. And I have tremendous respect for all of them. But now it's like, I feel like I'm friends with them. So it's not a big deal to reach out to them. And so I was able to ask them for advice, and they would just give me unsolicited advice, which I thought was amazing. And so that working at Bigger Pockets was like the best thing that ever happened to me for sure. And because they promote and encourage real estate investing so much, I had the leniency to like go and do some house tours during the workday, and they didn't care. Right. And so, within 2 months of moving to Denver, I had purchased my first property. And that was my first house hack. And so, yeah, I can get into that if you want.
Cool.
Or how
yeah. Well, just explain to my audience, because, most of them have probably never heard of house hacking, and there's a million ways that you can do it, right? Really. Well, I'll let you explain it. What is house hacking?
Yeah. So house hacking is just the idea that you buy a property for a low percent down, typically 0 to 5% down. With that loan type, you're required to live there for 1 year. So you live there for 1 year. And while you're living there, you're renting out either the other rooms, if it's a single family home, or the other units, if it's a multifamily home, and the rent covers your mortgage and you're living for free, eliminating your largest expense, while also, cash flowing, building equity in the property with just such a low amount down. So it's just one of the tremendous ways to build wealth and get started in real estate.
Yeah, no. And that's great. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of that, right? Because typically the housing is our biggest expense every single month, right? And you found a way, and I'm sure, Josh and Brandon, and just being in that atmosphere, they kind of already led you to that, and you were able to completely eliminate your housing budget, right? If not, you got paid.
Yeah. So the rule of thumb that I was always told is that you should spend a third of your gross income on rent, right? That was the budgeting tip. And so like naturally enough, it just so happens that the average American spent 33% of their gross income on housing. Well, like imagine eliminating that, right? You're now saving 33% of what you would be spending. And, if you're making $100,000 a year, that's $33,000 a year. And you can easily buy a property every single year with $33,000. Yeah. And so, even just doing just that itself, assuming no appreciation, no cash flow, nothing, you're able to buy a property a year, and within 5 years, you can have some serious wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So you bought your first property. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So this property, it was an up-down duplex, and it was kind of attached to a row home. So it was like a series of row homes, but like the last one, which is the one I bought, was an up-down duplex. And so it was 1.5 miles from the office. So I could walk or bike to the office, which eliminates my second largest expense, transportation.
Mhm.
Right. And so I was like, okay, I can live here, walk or bike to work, and I can live for free. Like, this is an amazing situation. The only downside is that the area was a little bit sketchy. And so, but it was still so close. It was still just 1 mile or 2 from downtown Denver. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to buy here anyway. I like the location, and it's great for my life scenario. So I went ahead, I bought that property for $385,000. I used an FHA loan. So for 3.5% down, I lived in the bottom unit and rented out the top unit. My mortgage payment on that property was like $2,200, I think. I was renting the top out for $1,750, and I was living in the bottom. Right. And I was still paying a little bit of the mortgage, right? It's about $500 a month. And I was like, I told myself I don't want to pay the mortgage. I'm not paying any part of this mortgage. So what I did was I Airbnb'd out my bedroom, and I put up like a little room, like a cardboard room divider and a curtain in the living room, and made a makeshift bedroom, like maybe 60 square feet in the living room. And that's what I lived out of for a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
but you completely eliminated your housing expense, right?
Yeah. So I was getting about $1,100 a month from the Airbnb in my bedroom. And so now that property was making me $2,850 on rent, and I was paying $2,250 or $2,200, whatever it was for the mortgage. So I was making, after setting some money aside in case things break and everything, probably about $300-400 a month plus living for free. So yeah, it was an amazing situation. Not to mention, not to say that anyone listening to this should be, setting up a cardboard box and a curtain, but I was just so determined at that time. And I was 24. So I was like, I'm young, I'm single at the time. I'm going to take advantage of my living situation right now and do just that.
Man, that's awesome. It's cool to see that you cut so deep, because I mean, even just buying a duplex and living in the basement, you could have gone from, $24,000 a year in your mortgage expense, which is still reasonable, right, by society's standards, to now you're spending less than $12,000 a year, probably close to $10,000 a year in your housing expense. But you're like, no, I'm going further. Man, there's so much gold in there, right? Because it's not forever. It's a chapter.
Mm-hmm. That's the big thing too. Yeah. And people are going to make fun of you, right? And they're going to think I got called a miser by my grandfather, right? He thought I was just like sitting in the basement, like sitting on all this cash. No, it's a foundation. It's a foothold to get you to the next level. No one wants to house hack forever. No one wants to share a space forever, but like, it's just the foundation. Sorry, yeah. I think I cut you off, man.
No, I was just going to say, like, man, you do that 1, 2, 3 times, even just once for 1 year, like that could completely change the trajectory of your financial future. Right. So, for sure. Man, that's phenomenal. So, okay. So that's how you got started on your journey to financial freedom. Bought a duplex. Maybe tell us, in 2 or 3 minutes, kind of from there to today, other steps you took.
Yeah, for sure. So basically from there, I just got smarter with my house hacking. So every single year, year 2, I bought a single family home about, maybe 10 miles outside of Denver, for cheaper, for $343,000. It had 5 beds and 2 baths. I lived in 1 bedroom, so I had my own room, and rented out the other rooms. Right. Then I bought, a year later, I bought a third place. This one had a kitchen in the downstairs and a kitchen in the upstairs, obviously too. So I like Airbnb the downstairs, rented out the 2 extra rooms in the upstairs, had my own bedroom. Year 4, I do something similar. Year 5, I do something similar. And so I've been house hacking now for 5 years, married, and we kind of have our forever home now. And even in our forever home, we're going to grow into this home. Right now, it's just me and my wife. We plan to have kids, but right now our basement was going unused. So we rented out the basement for $1,500 a month. Our mortgage payment's like a little over $3,000. So we're not living for free, but the intent was not to live for free in this house, right? It was just, I'm just like, we're just kind of like, why not? But we've accumulated, 5 house hacks from me. She has 2 of her own, and we've got a handful of other rental properties that we just bought traditionally, to the point where, our basic expenses are covered by our real estate, and working is now optional.
Yeah. And the cool thing that, just seeing that at a high level very quickly is, you now control and own a bunch of properties in Denver, which is a growing market. It's an appreciating market. Rents are skyrocketing, very much like Salt Lake, right? Where I'm based out of. And I see that you now control a ton of properties with very little down, And so you get to collect all that upside where the bank can't come to you and say, hey, we lent you 95% on this house in Denver. It's gone up, double. We want 95% of the appreciation, right? Like that's the great thing about the mortgage is it's a one-way bet.
Yeah, no, that's the best thing. And so that first house I bought right now, it's 5 years ago. So we can kind of like, we can backtrack and see, I bought it for 3.5% down. So I bought it for $17,000. I put $17,000 down. That property since then, after I've moved out, rents have gone up, is cash flowed me probably $1,500 to $2,000 a month, every single month. Right. It has appreciated. I could probably sneeze and get 700,000 for it right now. Right. So it's made like 300,000 plus all the cash flow. Right. And I put $17,000 down. Like who wouldn't say, hey, I'm going to put $17,000 right here for 5 years. And then in 5 years, that's going to come back and going to give me 400 grand.
Yeah. And where else can you get returns like that? That is relatively safe because unless that street happens to get bombed or something, like it's not going away.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. And even if it does, you got insurance, but like,
yeah,
it's like, people will say, people will make the arguments for crypto and NFTs and all that. But my argument to that is you just never really know what's going to happen with that stuff. It's just too early on. And I know people have high hopes and you may have high hopes and I don't know about it. So I'm not going to make any comment on it, but like real estate, I know will just continue to go up over time and it will have its downfalls, but it will always climb back up.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you talk to anyone who's, who bought a house 30 years ago and ask them what they paid and then ask them what they think it's worth today. And I've never had anyone say, oh, well, I paid, $50,000 for a house 30 years ago and it's only worth $50,000 today. Maybe there's some parts of, the Midwest that have that, but for the most part, you buy in a good market in a good area and over long periods of time, 5-10 years, it's going to be worth significantly more. And, that's like, man, there's no way you could have made that much money passively investing in anything in the stock market.
No, nothing. The stock market, I'm not sure what it's done since 2017. It's probably gone up a little bit, but like certainly not, quadrupled or whatever the 5 times is, So
well, yeah, you're talking about like thousands of percent now.
Yeah, I don't even know what the ROI is, right? But I just know it's a lot. So
yeah, that's awesome, man. So now that everyone kind of knows a little bit more about you, if they didn't already know, what's one thing that you want to tell someone who is working towards financial freedom?
Yeah. So I think, definitely lean into it, right? Be ready to get criticized if this is a new thing for you. Like your friends aren't going to get it. Your family's not going to get it. And so all the people that you know and love who've given you advice your whole life are going to tell you to play it safe and to don't invest and to don't do it this way, but do it the way they did it. Right. And so I was getting a lot of that, but I just kept going back to myself and thinking like, Mom, Dad, Grandpa, I love you guys, but I don't want my life to be like yours, right? I don't want to work until I'm 60. Right? I don't want that. And so why would I take career advice from someone who's doing something that I don't want to do? And so look at the people who are doing what you want to do and take their advice would be step number 1. And then 2, just like, don't be afraid to take action. Just get started early because you'll be happier the earlier you get started.
Yeah, no. And that action is, man, that's key. Because had you not taken action, and if you look at it, like take a step back, there was probably less than 10 decision points that you made that you actually took action, right? Over the last 5 years that made all of the difference, right? But just taking those actions year over year compounded, and man, it's phenomenal to see where you're at now.
Yeah. And it's just, you don't want to look back and say, I was thinking about buying back in 2022 and man, I should have bought then. Right. I was just thinking, like, I've heard when I was buying back in 2017, I'm still buying now, by the way, but when I was buying my first one, having those thoughts like, oh, should I wait? Is it at the peak? I just remember hearing people saying, oh, I wish I had bought in 2012, or I wish I had bought here. And I'm like, man, I don't want to say I wish I had bought in 2017, 5 years from now. I want to be like, So that was another thought in my head.
Yeah. Well, and if you buy, especially the way you're preaching to buy, which I think is phenomenal, what's someone's downside if they buy and the market corrects by 30%?
I mean, as long as you buy a cash flowing property, right?
Yeah.
That's not, not totally, destroyed, which should figure out in your inspection. And if you got a good realtor and a good, some good comrades around you, they'll be able to help you make sure you don't buy something that bad. The downside is very little because you got to pay a living expense anyway, right? If the market drops, rent never drops as much as the market. And so you'll still be able to cash flow and just kind of hold on until the market picks back up, because anytime it goes down, usually it just takes a couple of years for it to come back right up to where it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And just thinking back to your first house hack, had the market crashed in 2018, 1 year after you bought it, like what's your worst case scenario? Your renters upstairs move out and you put new renters in and you're still paying way less than you would have.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even if, and then you start buying buying other properties if the market goes down, right? Because now you got some houses on sale.
Yeah.
So you always just kind of have to, take what the market gives you.
Yeah. That's awesome. And take action.
And take action. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always a thing.
Oh yeah. Well, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently on your journey?
I think about this a lot. And for a while, I was like, literally nothing. I wouldn't do anything differently. But I thought about it more. And what I would do differently is I had someone, I won't mention who, tell me that I shouldn't raise outside money because it's just too hard, too much to deal with, like not worth it, not worth the risk of investing with other people's money. And so most of my investments at this point have just been with my own money, with my own assets, and reinvesting and whatnot. But if you want to grow fast, think about taking other people's money, right? Do a couple deals with yourself first. I think that's just to prove your concept and prove that you know what you're doing. But don't be afraid to ask friends and family for money to maybe take on some bigger deals and do some things that, that maybe you're outside of your comfort zone a little bit. And so that's one thing that I didn't do. And now I'm like, man, I see people that have used other people's money and they're just like exploding. And I'm like, oh man, that's how you do it. That's the leverage. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my piece of advice.
Oh, that's such good advice, man. There's a lot of takeaways there. There's a lot of people who probably shouldn't be taking other people's money though, right?
There's that too. Yeah.
So, because I mean, if you don't know what you don't know, right? So someone like you, who like you've been in the trenches, you've dealt with tenants directly. You've heard all the BS responses they give you. You're able to learn how to manage a property manager, right? So now you can take your knowledge and you can springboard it if you choose. Right. I mean, I think if you take on investors' money, then obviously that comes with additional responsibility. And, I kind of look at it like we've got, two choices. We've got freedom or we've got responsibility. Right. And we can totally grow one business, and real estate investing, by the way, is a business. And the more you grow that though, and add team members in, and, you may get more flexibility, but you don't get more freedom, right? Because then you're subject to, SEC regulations and just so many other levels of complexity, which is fine, but you can grow, exponentially faster and help other people get great returns. So it's kind of just, what's, like you said at the very beginning of the podcast, like, what do you want the end goal to be, and then model after those people. So, and I think, not to get on too much of a tangent here, but you probably went through this as well. We all kind of start out, on a 3-step process. Like, we all have to figure out how to go from being a spender to a saver, and then from a saver to an investor. You can kind of see that in your story where you're like, hey, I don't really want to spend 33% of my income on my housing expense. I want to save that. How do I do it? And you kind of work through that. And then now all of a sudden you're kind of stepping into the bigger investor roles because of, who your network is and who you're surrounded with, where, you might want to go raise capital and go bigger and do more.
100%, man. And just what you said there, right? You have to know what your goal is and what you want, what life do you want to live? We actually just interviewed somebody today for our podcast that him and his wife had bought maybe 5 or 6 rental properties. They make maybe $7,000 to $10,000 a month passively, and they do nothing. They just chill on that, casually manage the properties, and like that's they're so happy, and that's all they want. And so, like, if that's the life you want to live, then go towards that. And you can always change. You can hit that $7,000 to $10,000 mark and not be fulfilled then, right? And then you do something bigger and better. But I would say, like, if your goal is to grow wealth as fast as possible, look at people look at very young people who are very wealthy and figure out what they did in real estate, right? Yeah. And I'd say most people are, how did they leverage? What leverage did they pull? But yeah, it's totally up to, what you want.
Yeah, for sure. So good. Cool. Well, Craig, we're gonna link to all your social media in the show notes and the book if they want to go purchase it. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so you can find me. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. I'm the FI guy. If you want to learn about house hacking, I've got a book called The House Hacking Strategy. You can find that on Bigger Pockets or on Amazon, wherever books are sold. And we've got our own podcast as well called Investify. So if you want to, we just interview early stage investors. So definitely hit us up there.
So the podcast is in Invest to FI, right? Like financial independence, Invest to FI. Cool.
Yep. The number 2. Yep.
Cool. Well, dude, with that, we'll take it out of here. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and knowledge. We'll see you later, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordy, man. We'll see you soon.
See ya. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Financially Free Investor. If you found value in this episode or know someone who would find value in this information, please share with them, subscribe, and send us a review.